Welcome back to my channel, and this is video number 2 of a series of videos about the G center. The G center is that yellow diamond, if it's colored in on your chart, which is really the heart. It's what we tend to think of as the heart center. Just as a review from what we talked about last time, the G center and the will center are the two aspects of the heart that we kind of understand from like the chakra system, or even from just understanding the heart as an energy center. And so the G center is the center for love, lovability, identity, and direction. This is the place where your sense of who you are, what you're here to do, what you're here to provide, what your purpose is, how you feel about other people, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your body, how you connect to the natural world, and your ability to tell the story of who you are, and also to be able to receive from superconsciousness and from the energetic field at large. All of these are seated here in the G center. So in this series of videos, we're going through all of the different channels that go through the G center. So in this image, you can see here, there's a lot of activity going on in this G center. It actually has almost as many channels as the throat center, which is, has the most activations and the most channels going through it. But the G center actually has 10, and we're going to unpack a little bit of complicated energy around that today, because there's only 8 gates on the G center, and yet there are 10 channels. So we'll be diving into that as we get started. Okay, here we go. If you haven't had a chance to watch the first video here, my suggestion is that you watch this one first, because it's got the larger introduction and the context and all of that. And this really follows on that one. So I think this one will make more sense if you watch that one first. As I remarked upon in the first video, there are primarily individual channels that go through the G center, which is interesting, right? Because the individual circuitry is here to be different. It's here to bring change. It doesn't fit in. It is the conduit for the evolutionary impulse of humanity. It is the place where really leading edge breakthrough, out of the box ideas come in. So last time we talked about the knowing circuit, and the knowing circuit coming right up through the central channel, coming up into the G and then up into the throat. Today, we're going to talk about the integration circuit, because the integration circuit is complex, and I want to give you a view about what this looks like so that you can understand this part of the wiring of the chart. There isn't anywhere else in the chart that has this kind of complex wiring, so I want to unpack it for you a little bit. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the centering circuit, which goes directly from the sacral into the G, and then the will center is also coming in. So we've kind of got power from both ends, engines from both sides coming in to supercharge the heart. So we'll talk about that next time. I want to start by talking about the gate 10 today. This is the gate of self-love, and it is a complex gate because it has 3 different channels that run through it. Today, we're going to talk about the integration circuit, and next time we're going to talk about the centering circuit. But in each case, there are channels that run through the gate 10. So in the integration circuit, we have 2 different channels that run through the gate 10. One is the 2010, and the other is the 5710. So I want to talk about the gate 10 first on its own, because it is a very, very important gate, and you can see that it is being activated in multiple ways by different kinds of energies. Long before I came to human design, while I was doing my breathwork practice and my spiritual development practice, I talked to people a lot about self-love. And I used to say self-love is the final frontier. I still say that. Oftentimes, it's easier for us to learn to love and forgive other people than it is for us to learn to love and forgive ourselves. Now, I do have a recommendation here for a book. This is called Madly in Love with Me. It's by Christina Arylo. She's a good friend of mine, and she has been the self-proclaimed queen of self-love. She's now moved on to women's leadership, but she has really built out a wonderful book here about all of the different limbs of self-love, helping us to understand that it's not just a simple concept. It actually has many different parts. And that book is full of recommendations and exercises, and I'll put the link to it down in the description so you can go and find it. One of the things that's interesting about the Gate 10 in human design, that it's also known as the blame gate. So let's unpack that a little bit, okay? So the blame gate is when we are blaming ourselves, criticizing ourselves, beating up on ourselves, which most of us do or have done. Most of us have been conditioned to do that. And this can create a kind of self-loathing, definitely self-judgment, always finding things that are wrong about ourselves. Just ask any woman how she feels about her body, like any woman in the United States, because we've been so conditioned not to love and appreciate our bodies. And this is an aspect of self-love, is how we feel about our bodies. And so the blame is when we're blaming ourselves for not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being pretty enough, not having done this well enough, whatever it is, not being worthy, all of these different reasons that we can come up with where we beat ourselves up. So we're blaming ourselves. This is very painful. And so what we often do, and again, this is really unconscious, is that we start to project that blame out onto other people. We make other people bad or wrong. We criticize them. We judge them. Sometimes we're only doing it in our own minds. Sometimes we're saying it out loud. But we can be projecting that blame out to others so that we don't have to feel the pain of how much we are criticizing and beating up on ourselves. Now, when you get in that energy, the blame is going, and then you can attract the blame from outside, and then people can start blaming you. So there's different ways that this can show up for yourself. The really disempowered aspect is when you're blaming yourself. You're in a victim consciousness. You are have a lot of self-hatred, even self-loathing, although it might be well disguised. But at base, there's a very disempowered way of thinking about yourself, feeling about yourself, relating to yourself. And this can definitely fuel victim consciousness in a kind of disempowered way. Now, victim consciousness can also act in a kind of empowered way. It's ironic. And this is where the shadow comes in, because that's where you're projecting the blame out, you're projecting the judgment out to others. And so you may think of yourself as a victim, but you're still kind of pushing things out onto other people. Neither one of this is really going to feel good to you. It's not going to empower you truly. It will tear you down, and it'll kind of just make you feel crummy about yourself, and often it will disrupt your relationships. So what do we want to be able to do instead is to cultivate our self-love. Now, I know some people think, well, isn't that narcissism? Right? Narcissism is when you're self-absorbed. Narcissism is when you really don't even see other people. Other people are a projection where you see them as fulfilling your needs. Basically, self-love is not about that. Your self-love is when you come to appreciate yourself, you come to acknowledge yourself, you love yourself despite your so-called faults or the mistakes that you make. You can fall in love with different aspects of yourself, and human design can be a really great tool to help you do that. It's one of the things I love to do when I do readings, is to help people fall even more in love with themselves. I think that self-love is a foundation really for pretty much everything in life, but it's certainly for our ability to love other people and to be in right relationship with other people. Because if we're not in right relationship with ourselves, if we're judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves, it's very hard to have a healthy relationship with another person. Because you can be going to the other person and have a bottomless pit of a need for recognition, for them to tell you how great you are, to tell them how pretty you are, all of these things, right? Because you've got this bottomless well of kind of self-hatred that is not receptive to when people say beautiful things about you. So you get to notice if you push off compliments or if you push off when people say things that are acknowledging you or appreciating you, and learning to take them in and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And just be like, yeah, I take that in. Yeah, I love that about myself too. And it's interesting to me that the gate 10 has 3 different channels that run through it. The 57 has 2 channels and the 34 has 2 channels. But only the 10 has 3 different activations that run through it. To me, this is a signal for how significant this particular energy is. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into the integration circuit and the channels that move through the gate 10. The first one we're going to look at here is the 5710. Now, in traditional human design, this is known as the channel of perfected form, and in quantum human design is known as the channel of human potential. Let's just unpack that a little bit, because if you look at the gates, you'll see the 57 is on the spleen. The spleen is the center for instinct and intuition, the immune system, and right timing. All of the different gates of the spleen center are fear gates, because the spleen is the center for instinct, and so the fear of the spleen gates are all related to instinct, and the particular fear of the 57 is the fear of the future. One question that arises is the energy that is coming from the spleen and going into the 10 and going into the G center, is it more flavored with instinct and fear? Or is it more elevated into the energy of intuition? Because the 57 in traditional human design is known as one of the most intuitive gates in the chart. I think there's a lot of intuitive gates in the chart, but I will go along with that the 57 is highly intuitive. However, it's important to understand that it's not intuitive if it's stuck in fear, right? If you're in instinct, you're actually not in your intuition, because the intuition is a higher faculty. Your intuition is where you interface with your inner being and with spirit. It's how spirit speaks to you, or your inner being speaks to you, is through your intuition. And if you're really in your fear, you're not going to actually be able to hear it. So we're going from the spleen to the G center, and we've got human potential here, and we've got perfection. I have this channel defined in my chart, and I do think it supports me to create really high quality work. I actually don't have a lot of perfectionism in my sensibility or the way that I do things, but I do have a high standard, and I do think that this energy supports me with that high standard. And it really helps if we have the spleen at its most elevated state, right? So that it's not in a quagmire of fear of the future, right? But actually looks forward to the future, can see how things can be created in beautiful form. This piece about human potential really interests me, because if we think about the way that intuition and our ability to really tap into our own inner guidance and our own inner wisdom, and how that can fuel the G center, which is all about love and lovability and identity and direction, we see that this intuition can really fuel our ability to know who we are, because our intuitive faculties are a huge aspect of who we are. They're not beside the point. They're not something just to, sort of think are interesting. They're actually a core component of who we are. So when we're able to bring this intuitive aspect into our understanding of our self-love and also the G center more generally, then we can have a very intuitive, very spirit-filled, very soul-fueled, if you will, understanding about who we are. And that definitely feels like human potential to me. One caveat about this piece about perfection and perfected form is the ability to be able to start to love the imperfect perfection or the perfect imperfection, however you want to think about that, because life is going to bring you challenge. You are going to make mistakes, whatever your human design. We all do this. This is partly how we learn. This is how we explore the world, is through trying things out and seeing how they work and making mistakes and correcting and moving on and trying stuff. And so having a high standard for quality or even a certain desire for perfectionism does not necessarily have to get in your way, provided that you're not always reaching for some ideal, which is actually not attainable. That's just a kind of conditioning that you have that is keeping you small. That's more like the instinctual fear of like, ooh, if I put myself out there and it's not all perfect, it's not all beautiful, then I'm going to get a lot of criticism, right? And that you can see how that's fueled both by that that fear of the spleen, but then also that self-love where you're doubting yourself, questioning yourself, blaming yourself. Whereas if you can open your heart to truly love yourself and accept yourself and know that, sure, I'm going to make mistakes. I screw up, just like everybody else. And that's okay, because this is how I learn. It's how I grow. And as you do that, you'll be able to really utilize the energetic support that 5710 brings you. Just as a reminder here that you do not have to have the 5710 or any of these channels or gates that I'm talking about defined in your human design chart in order for you to get the benefit of these energies. Because the truth is, you will have experienced all of these energies many times, even if they're undefined in your chart, even if they're white on your chart. But if you cultivate an awareness of what they are, and if you, for example, start building your self-love, you're going to have that. It may not be 100% sustainable all the time, but it'll kind of be like your baseline. And so you'll have it there for you when challenges come your way, if you build that energy, your awareness of that energy, by using your chart. The other channel that's in the integration circuit that runs through the gate 10 of the G center is the 2010. The gate 20 in traditional human design is known as metamorphosis, and in quantum human design is known as patience. This is on the throat center, and it's a super interesting, powerful gate because there's a lot of energy that comes up from this right-hand side of the body up into that gate 20. And it's almost like a gatekeeper of that energy because there's a lot that's coming up here, and it's kind of like, okay, we need to have patience when we are working with the energy that's coming up from lower into the body and wanting to express out through the throat. When this energy is being fueled by that self-love of the gate 10, then it can be expressing from a really beautiful, embodied, and empowered place. And when it's not coming from self-love, like when it's coming from that blame energy, it's often called the verbal gunslinger because it can be kind of harsh. If it's coming through that self-love, but it's really more self-loathing or self-hatred, but you don't want to feel it, so you're projecting it out onto other people, it can come right out through that 20, and it can be quite blaming and harsh on other people. So you want to watch out for that and really cultivate your ability to love yourself so that when you express from your G through this channel, it's coming in a way that invites other people to feel their self-love, to appreciate themselves, to know that they are worthy, and that they can be empowered, because individual circuitry is all about self-empowerment. And this is part of individual circuitry. The integration circuit is a lot about individual and self-empowerment. So you want to be able to express from a place where you feel empowered. And when you feel empowered in your heart, You don't need to criticize other people. You don't need to blame other people. You don't need to do any of that because you're really grounded in yourself. And when you do feel empowered and you do feel that self-love, then you can kind of be immune to what other people say to you because you know how great you are. You've developed that for yourself. You've self-connected enough that you know that about yourself. So other people's opinions, none of your business, right? Because you already know how you feel about yourself. And when you feel that way, you don't need to blame anybody. You don't need to criticize anybody. You don't need to seek revenge. You don't have to be resentful because you've basically taken responsibility for your own life and you are building your own sense of identity and your direction. And that will be your support going forward. Because the 20 is on the throat, it's the place where we start to express with words. Because if you think about your heart energy, right? Sometimes you don't necessarily have the words to be able to express how you feel. Same with your intuition. You might not really feel like you have the words to express your intuition. And so the 20 is the place where that feeling in your heart, the feeling of your intuition starts to get formed into words. So it's a really important place to develop a relationship to because part of our evolutionary process is our ability to come more from intuition, to come more from love, to come from these higher faculties at a higher frequency. And our culture has not done a good job of understanding this, having language around it, teaching us about it. So this is really the invitation that we're receiving from human design is how can we start to language, to tell stories about, to express ourselves that's really coming from the heart and coming from our intuition. There are two other channels that run through the integration circuit. One is the 3420, which is the channel of the manifesting generator, and then the 5720. Now, I didn't mention them because neither one of them run through the G center, but the integration circuit has all four of those. And if you take a look at this picture, you can see how complicated it is because you might think, for example, that the 34 is in the integration circuit going from the 34 to the 10, but it's not. It's in the centering circuit. And we'll talk about that in the next video. And so we want to be able to unpack kind of what's in the integration circuit because it has a special quality of needing to be integrated, like what's happening in that circuit. You can see how complicated it is, and you can see that we need to have patience around what we're expressing. We need to have the ability to really build that self-love that we have. We need to be able to have some pausing, even though that 34 is really busy and it's really fast and it's wanting to go, 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 go. We still need to be able to slow down a bit and be able to take some time to integrate. I know my mentor, Karen Curry Parker, in a class that I did with her, said that people who have a lot of the integration circuit defined in their charts, it's almost like being emotionally defined. You really need time for clarity. So this is something to take in and to consider for yourself as you're looking at what is defined in your chart, but also just generally human design pretty much all the time, honestly, is inviting us to slow down, to pay attention to right timing, and to really be tuning in. Is this something that is right for me to express and to do right now, or should I wait for a better circumstance or for the right conditions to arise? And the integration circuit does that for us also. Okay, that's my video for this week about the G Center. Next time, we'll be talking about the centering circuit and how it runs through the G Center and really supercharges the G Center. I want to invite you, if you haven't gotten it already, to get my Transform Your Life with Human Design Audio e-course. So it comes with some audios, it comes with a beautiful 75-page full color book that will lead you through all the different aspects of the chart. It'll help you understand the different types and strategies and authorities and definition, and it's quite comprehensive. And then there's also a deep dive journal that will help you to take what you learn and then apply it to your own chart and apply it to your own life. Because for me, I teach about human design because it's an evolutionary tool. It's helping us to transform our lives, not just because I'm interested in it as a system. And I invite you to do the same. Okay, I will put the link down in the description, and it'll be here after I sign off. Many blessings. Much love.